Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Natural Fails channel. And today we are going to be taking a look at the Battlecry playtest. This playtest has dropped today on April 29th. Myself and my good friend Menthu have been spending the entire day at our respective jobs just poring over this document. And boy, do we have some thoughts for you guys.
Yeah, why work when you can read Pathfinder playtests?
I'm constantly reading Pathfinder playtests instead of doing my actual job that gets me money. Who needs money, really, when you can just play Pathfinder all day?
So true.
All right. So, we have two new classes that are coming out in the upcoming Marshall book. I believe it is called the Battlecry book. Am I getting that correct? It's just Battlecry?
It just looks like Battlecry, although there is an exclamation point, so we might be supposed to yell it.
I unfortunately I live in an apartment. I'm not going to be yelling. But
Oh man.
just pretend I'm putting a lot more emphasis on the battle cry every time I say it. Uh but yeah, so we have two new classes to check out, and the first being the Commander, and then we have the Guardian. So we might as well go in alphabetical order as we always do. So if you will all bear with me, I will go ahead and do the best thing I know how to introduce the Commander class, and that's just reading the blurb that Paizo gave us. So, Commander, you approach battle with the knowledge that tactics and strategy are every bit as crucial as brute strength or numbers. You may have trained in classical theories of warfare and strategy at a military school, or you may have refined your techniques through hard-won experiences as part of an army or mercenary company. Regardless of how you came by your knowledge, you have a gift for signaling your allies from across the battlefield and shouting commands to rout even the most desperate conflicts, allowing your squad to exceed their limits and claim victory. So we have our, I think, our second intelligent based marshal here. So I'm very excited about that. How do you feel about that, Menthu?
I'm not surprised they went with the intelligence key attribute, but it's so odd to see a second one.
Yeah,
Just so quick back to back.
yeah. It does not feel like investigator and then magus were so far. And now that I'm thinking about it, there's technically two. Although now with the changing cantrips, uh, completely dumping intelligence on a magus is not an issue at all. Uh,
I guess so, but it feels wrong. It doesn't feel right.
it doesn't feel good to me. No, I don't like doing that, but it doesn't really matter unless you're trying to play someone who's intelligent. So there's those benefits. But yeah, so first thing to note about the commander is their unique gameplay mechanic, and that is their tactics. So Jax, I'm sure you have read that basically how it works is that they have a folio of these combat maneuvers that you can pick through and sort of pick the few that you like. If I remember, I think you get to pick four when you create the character, and then you get to add a couple either through taking feats or just leveling up. And do you want to talk about some of your favorite tactics that we have, especially the low level ones?
Yeah, so the standout ones for me, just because of how sheerly funny they are the mountaineering training and naval training tactics. Because you just get to tell someone they can climb or they can swim, and it happens for everyone.
Yeah, and the best part about these is it's one action, so that means you can continuously do this during exploration, and that means you have essentially just given your entire party a climb speed or a swim speed at level 1.
Yeah, and even this is more of a flavor thing, but even if you have NPCs traveling with you, you can set them as your squad mates, I believe. I don't think there's a limit on it just affecting PCs. So you can just have everyone climb.
Yeah, and now that you bring up squad mates, that's something else we should maybe bring up. So basically, your tactics. You get this folio, you get to have a certain number, and then you get to prepare a certain number from your folio that you're allowed to use, but you can spend 10 minutes to retrain which ones that you have from your folio to which ones you have prepared. And when you do that, you designate party members or people to be squad mates, and that is how you decide who will be able to participate in your tactics. So you do have to, at the beginning of a combat or beginning of a day, decide these are the people who's going to be my allies. And if for some reason you have more allies than you can squad mates, which is equal to 2 plus your intelligence modifier, you can just spend 10 minutes to re-choose who's going to be your squad mates.
Okay, so then the next thing we probably should touch on is the downsides to these tactics, because I think there's two major downsides.
Yes.
That being the reaction cost and the fact that a squad mate can only benefit from one tactic per round.
Yes. So I think one of the interesting things about a lot of these tactics, and we'll throw a couple up for you to see. You'll notice that some of them don't require you to use your reaction, but a lot of the better ones do. So this does mean that by engaging with your commander's tactics, you could be potentially cutting yourself off from your own class specific reactions. Reactive strike, everyone loves that, and you could potentially lose your reactive strike. And even the formations, let me find it here. Strike hard, which is you command an ally to attack, choose a squad mate who can see or hear you, or hear your signal. That ally immediately attempts to strike as a reaction. That doesn't have the added effect like reactive strike, where you can potentially disrupt whatever triggered it, right? So it is explicitly weaker, but it is also good for classes that don't have reactions, right? So it's going to really depend on your party composition.
Yeah, I think I think strike hard is one of those few tactics that's just it's so basic you can use it all the time. I think it's going to be one of those ones that just basically every commander is probably going to pick up at some point and put in their folio.
I definitely agree. I think Strike Hard is definitely one of those standout ones that when I was reading that, I was like, yeah, that's good. Because your rogue, for especially if you have a rogue companion, I know rogues can get ways to use their reaction to attack, but that's not at level 1, right? That's like a level 8 reaction. So you just have Strike Hard from level 1, you can get your rogues hitting people for that extra sneak attack damage, not on their turn, with full map, not having to worry about map at all.
Yeah, and one of the biggest benefits to this as well is that if you have a ranged marshal who is just too way too far away to actually, make a reactive strike with an unarmed attack, they can just shoot and they're good.
Yeah, yeah, because it doesn't specify that it has to be a melee strike. It's just a strike. Uh, and bringing that up, I do think looking at a lot of these ones that deal with striking, you're going to feel really bad if you're a spellcaster in a lot of these situations, or if you're a kineticist and you don't have these really good strikes. But there's a lot of defensive ones that can benefit you. I think that the commander is really going to benefit from knowing what everyone else is playing before they pick what tactics they want in their folio.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those classes where you're going to be retraining these tactics a lot, and if you're retraining certain tactics, you're probably retraining feats too.
Yes. But let's go ahead and start talking about those feats, because I think they, along with the tactics, sort of help create this identity for the commander to be really this build your own support martial class, which is very interesting because I think there are a lot of classes that fit in that build your own fantasy sort of thing, like how you manipulate and how you interact on the battlefield, fighter being all these different stances, sorcerer being, what spell list. I think there is something very interesting here that we see that the commander has a lot of different ways to engage, not just with, hey, I give extra extra actions to allies. I also can heal, and I can also just put flat-footed on my enemies.
Yeah, there's a lot of support stuff, especially at the lower levels, which set up for your feats later on, but we'll talk about that later. Like guiding shot and setup strike. Uh, you just get to make your allies have a better chance to hit that enemy if you hit them, and that's level 2.
Level 2, and I can easily see a lot of these low-level commander feats being very fun to steal for your fighters or your barbarians. Just one action. Hey, I can help play just a little bit of support as long as I have. I mean, I assume we have not seen the dedication. I'm going to assume that this is going to be probably an intelligence 14 or intelligence plus 2 now using the remaster language that you need that intelligence. But if you're already going to be playing something like a Magus and you don't want to dump intelligence or an investigator, I can see a lot of these early level commander feats being very fun to maybe take and put onto your own character.
Yep. One of the other main things that's going to be seen throughout basically the entirety of the commander class is the use of the warfare lore skill.
Yes.
Get to replace so many
Yes.
things.
It is honestly sort of unbelievable all the things that you can replace with warfare lore, and that is just baked into the class. You don't even need to take any feats. This is just at the beginning. So to find the class feature that sort of does all this for you, it is called
I believe you just train it in, and then the first time it increases is military expertise,
yes.
which I think is, well, no, warfare expertise. Here we go.
Yeah, warfare expertise. So warfare expertise, which you get at level 3, it reads simply this: your knowledge of war and strategy grows and guides your decisions in battle. You gain expert proficiency in warfare lore. You can use warfare lore to recall knowledge about most creatures regardless of the type, but typically only to determine whether they can be reasoned with or their most notable offensive abilities and whether one of their saving throws is particularly weak. The GM can decide to allow additional questions to be answered when recalling knowledge with warfare lore as appropriate in the situation. In addition, as long as you are observing at least one opponent when observation or when initiative is rolled, you can use warfare lore for your initiative roll. And I think what is really powerful about this is the wording observing, which just means you need to be able to see them. That there isn't anything special about that. And that's pretty typical.
Basically, as long as you have as long as they are under one of the observed conditions, you will be able to use this, which is almost always.
Yes, and this skill automatically increases. It's basically a another core stat like your armor or your weapon proficiency.
Yeah, but it's like additional lore where as soon as you can get it to a higher proficiency, normally it happens. So by level 15, you have legendary warfare lore.
Yes, and it's really nifty how they have done this and made warfare lore just important because I know from a personal experience, you and one of our other uh, players at our own personal table have made these characters who have warfare lore, but it never feels like it comes up enough.
Yeah, it does. There was a few skill feats where it was helpful, but it was only ever helpful for you as a player. You never actually helped the party plan something strategically for a combat. It was always just like, oh, you know what's happening. You get to benefit for initiative for this one combat. Like, it didn't feel great, but this allows everyone to benefit from your warfare expertise, which is amazing.
And I think it really plays into a fantasy that at least players at my table really clearly want to engage in this idea that you are working as a group and that you are shouting out commands and getting everyone into formation. So again, this class is really going to be playing into that. But I also Want to also look into how they sort of help different types of support into this commander. And first, I want to look at the level 1 feat combat medic. The requirement is that you can prepare at least 2 tactics, which is something you can do at level 1. I assume that requirement is just in case.
I think it's in preparation for the dedication. I bet you're not going to be able to get tactics easily when you get a dedication for this. So it's to counter people just picking up every single feat.
Yes. And I also think it could also be potentially there might be some class archetypes coming down the line, which maybe might make it so you have less tactics for more something else, right? Again, that's a possibility. We don't know. We'll have to see what Paizo cooks. But I do think right now, as it is, I think you're right in that it is supposed to help not um, have it be stolen, essentially. But combat medic is you're trained in battle triage and wound treatment. You basically get to use your intelligence modifier in place of your wisdom modifier for any medicine check, and you automatically gain the battle medicine feat. Now, what is really good about this is that clarifying text that this can be used for any medicine check. I know that classes like the healing alchemist, they get similar things where they get to use a different skill check, but it doesn't explicitly say that any time that there is a medicine check, you are substituting, right? And so that leaves some of that, well, what's rules intended versus what's rules is written, right? But in this case, rules is written. All of those awesome medicine feats, you will be using your intelligence for this.
Yeah, and it especially plays in well to the flavor of this class because it's just something that makes sense. You've seen so many wounds in your time that now you just kind of know what you're supposed to do. You know what to do and what not to do with a gaping hole in someone's calf. Like it just makes sense. But I did just come up with a question for this as you were reading it out. When it says medicine check, does that apply for recall knowledge?
That's a good question. And just looking at that, I would say yes. If you're doing recall knowledge with medicine, I think you are allowed to use your intelligence modifier because it just says in place of your wisdom for medicine checks.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
That is really cool. And maybe someone in the comments can correct us if we're wrong, but that's what I'm reading anyway. I don't, that's what I think's
That's what
going
I'm
on.
hoping.
Yeah, I got my fingers crossed. And on top of that, there's another level 1 feat called Deceptive Tactics that basically does this a similar thing, except you get to use your warfare lore in place of deception when you are trying to create a diversion or feinting. So that means that you can be able to use your warfare lore to trick people in the middle of combat, which I think is very fun. I've had a lot of characters. I had a magus where I really wanted to be able to feint with the magus to just be able to off guard them or off guard. Yeah, that's the wording they use now. I was second guessing myself there, but to off guard an enemy so I can go in with a massive spell strike and see what happens. But now you can do that with intelligence, and that was sad for the magus because I didn't have the charisma for deception, and I was just a little intelligence boy. And if you're able to dig it deep enough into the archetype, and again, we don't know what the commander archetype is, but you could potentially grab this for some of those intelligence based characters who sort of lose out on those charisma battle features.
Yeah, being able to replace a charisma check with warfare lore is definitely something I never would have expected from this class. But yeah, it's just more and more and more on top of that. And then just to finish off the like kind of build like starting build path feats that are in the first level, there is Commander's Steed
Ah, yeah.
where you just get a mount and you're gonna be probably leveling them later to where you get eventually a savage mature companion just ride into battle on.
Yeah, and I really love that they recognized that that was going to be something people were going to want to do and said, "Hey guys, you don't need to worry about taking the Cavalier dedication. We give it to you at level 1 so it can be immediately a part of that fantasy."
Yeah, I do worry it steps a little bit on the toes of the what is it, the Steed ally champion
Mhm.
class feature, but this feels different enough. It's fine.
Yeah, and then also that's a divine ally, so there's extra benefits and things like that. So again, it comes down to what it is. And really quick, I did want to point this out before we end up moving too far away from it with tactics. Uh, is also one of their just base class features, and that's giving someone a reaction for your tactics. Drilled reactions. Once per turn, when you use a tactic, you can grant one of your allies of your choice benefiting from that tactic an extra reaction. This reaction has to be used for that tactic and is lost if not used.
So with drilled reactions, that doesn't say it costs anything. So that's just gonna happen whenever you use a tactic.
Anytime you use a tactic, as there's the cooldown once per round, so if you do multiple tactics, you can't, but there are feats that let you apply this to more people at one time. I think eventually capping out at 4, and I'm going to find what level that is.
I think it's 18, and I did want to touch on those. There's two feats that build on top of each other. Let me pull up their names real quick. Drilled reflexes and practiced reflexes. One's at level 10, one's at level 18. I'm not I'm not entirely sold on the idea that they should be feats on their own. I almost think that it feels weird to get feats that counteract the negatives of your class rather than building upon it.
I agree with that, and I do wonder if maybe that is something that is leaning on maybe being feat tax, because you're going to want to do that, especially when you look at some of the higher level tactics, which include maybe your entire party, especially something like steady aim fire or ready aim fire, the master tactic, um, where basically you get to basically say all to all your ranged friends and any of your spellcasters, that dude, fire at them, right? And that uses all of their reaction, and potentially if those same players had reactions that could have come up somewhere else, then you've just taken their reaction. Granted, I have a feeling that depending on your party comp, that will have been worth the opportunity cost, given that you hitting someone with potentially 3, 4 mapless attacks at one time, that enemy very well could be dead by the end of that.
Yeah, that could just be a completely done enemy depending on their health total before the attack
Yeah.
happens. And I'm currently playing a ranged ranger right now, and having something like that occur without getting my reaction refunded, I know I wouldn't care about, but there are certain classes that would really like to have their reactions refunded. Mostly the melee marshals though. I feel like those are the classes that have a lot of reactions that they really want to be using.
Yeah. And that's one of the things where that's where I wonder if maybe the reason why they didn't have it auto progress with your class is maybe you are planning on not using any of the multi-targeted tactics because of your team comp. For example, strike hard, the one that we said this is what everyone's going to take, that's targeting one person. You do that on your one melee marshal, you do that on your fighter, he still has an attack of opportunity or his reactive strike for later down the turn.
Yep. So yeah, I do think those are the situations it's going to be useful for. And then there are certain other tactics here though that I really think they fulfill a niche that I didn't ever quite consider, like Piranha Assault. It's an
Oh
expert
yeah.
tactic. Basically, you just get to tell squad mates that, hey, attack this enemy. You're gonna bypass their resistances. And it's an amount of resistance up to your level.
Yes.
So higher level you go, the way better that is because there is very few enemies that have resistance like over 10 or 15.
Yes.
So you're just gonna be bypassing almost all of it.
And this is also really, or this is also a point where we should bring up a feature of the commander that we haven't really touched on yet that ties directly into Piranha Assault. It's their banner.
Yeah. The banner is definitely the make or break feature of the commander because depending on your play style for your commander, it completely dictates what I almost want to say it completely dictates what feats and tactics you're going to be taking. Because if you're going to be supporting the backline, you either need to be in the backline or you need to take the plant banner feat where you just put your banner down and it's affecting your allies for you. Um,
While you run off and go do other things.
yeah, exactly. Or you need to be up in the front line and actually like putting in your own effort and making your front line hit even harder or be even tankier.
Yes. And that's where something, and just to clarify what banner does, and I'm sure it's on the screen right now while we're talking about it, but I feel like it's important to, for anyone who's maybe just listening in, not really watching. I know I do that all the time, but it is essentially a similar to the Marshal's aura, where it is this 30-foot aura that basically gives a +1 status bonus to will saves against fear effects, and that's all it does initially, but there are many tactics that explicitly state that your squad mates to participate in that tactic need to be affected by your banner. So something like what we were talking about earlier, ready fire or ready aim fire. All of the squad mates that are going to participate in that firing squad essentially needs to be affected by the commander's banner. Therefore, if you have all your ranger and your bow-based investigator all the way like 100 something feet away because they can afford to do that and they're not trying to catch no smoke, you're going to need to be back there with them, or as Menthu said, you're going to have that level 1 feat plant banner.
Yeah, but I will say the best reason why uh I think that you should potentially take Commander Steed, the level 1 feat where you get a mount, is because you can just jump from frontline to backline really quickly with good action
Yeah.
economy. Like, you're not going to be missing out on much. And you'll still be affecting people with your banner and your tactics without nearly as much drawback.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point that I actually hadn't even considered. But yeah, the horse movement is crazy, and especially since it's one action to essentially get two move actions. Yeah, you're flying over the battlefield.
You can also affix your banner to your steed, so if you need to hop off your mount and tell it to go somewhere else, you can still do that.
That is very true. You jump off your horse and you say, "All right, go to the back line, go support my people back there," and it'll go do that.
Yeah, it'll rally your troops. And also, there is one downside to the banner. I don't think we've brought it up yet.
Oh
If
yes,
if
it's
it
a
gets
it's a big one.
yeah, it's pretty gnarly depending on the situation. If it gets broken or stolen, uh, it will cause I think everyone within the aura to become frightened one.
Yes.
Yeah,
And what I will say at the very least is that as long as you're holding on to it, it probably won't get broken. The only thing I can think of, if you're holding it explicitly or if you've attached it to your weapon or your shield, it would need to be stolen off of you or something like the rogue sabotage feat. But it is a problem when you plant your banner because now it is not protected. So again, some of that thought, and if you leave it on your horse, God forbid your horse gets blown up, what happens to the banner at that point, you know?
Oh god, that'd be such a sad moment in a campaign.
That would be a campaign defining moment right there. The
Oh
commander
man.
sending his horse and then the horse eating a fireball.
Oh my god, the mascot of the party just charging in and it gets decimated instantly,
I ha-
causing everyone within range to become
there
frightened
there there are
ones.
people at our table that would cry over that. I would not blame them at
Oh man,
all.
I would maybe cry over that. That's so tragic.
It's sad, but again, that's one of the things that you got to think about, right? On how you are playing the commander, and I think this is definitely a class that you need to be using your head for it. You are not playing this class if you want to turn your head off and hit things.
Yeah, this is also a class where you cannot just wait for your turn to start and then think of what you're gonna do. Like, there's gonna be some turns where you're like, all right, I have the two tactics I'm gonna use for this turn, and that's all I'm gonna do. I'm not even gonna hit anyone. Uh, but there's definitely gonna be some turns where it's like everything is going to hell. I need to try and turn this around. What am I gonna do? And you can't just come up with it on the spot, or else you're gonna take like 6 7 minutes just to think about what you're doing.
Yeah. And not only that, I would also say this class might not be good for tables where all the players turn off when it is not their turn.
Yeah.
Especially since you're going to have the commander using a tactic and saying, "Hey, who wants to participate in this?" And then if you have one of those tables, and we have a couple players on occasion who will, when it is not their turn, go run off and do a chore or go grab some food. It's going to be very awkward when that player just ended their turn. They're like, "Okay, good. It's not my turn anymore. I'm going to go quickly grab a little snack so I can keep participating in the session, not get hungry." And then everyone's like, we don't know if that person is going to participate in the tactic. What do we do?" Because that's potentially them losing their reaction. They may have had a plan for that.
Yeah, there's definitely some tactics on here that's going to involve essentially the entire squad. And if you're not around, that's just going to suck. Although, there is a key note with being a squad mate in all of these tactics. As a squad mate, you don't got to do any of it. You can say
Oh
no at
yeah,
literally any point in time. So if your commander is ever like, "Hey, we're going to do this." You can just be like, "No, I don't want to. You're not gonna give me my reaction back. You're gonna give it to someone else. So I'm gonna sit out on this one."
yeah. And I think a lot of that coordination and discussion in the middle of combat is going to be very fun for tactical parties. But this should be maybe a con to consider if you're going to have a player bringing in the commander, if you're thinking about playing with the commander, you are asking your group to participate in that discussion. Do you want to use this ability now? Do you have something else that you want to use your reaction for? Because I'm sure there's a lot of players, they get their one reaction from their class and like, cool, that's it. I'm never going to get another reaction. I'm never going to have to think about that when it's not my turn.
Yeah. I will say this is gonna bring up a lot of issues if someone wants to play this, especially in a like more casual play sort of thing. 'Cause I know a lot of people are coming from 5e to Pathfinder 2e recently, and they're like, "Hey,
Hmm.
what can we do to get into this a little easier? What are some tips and notes?" And one of the tips I'd probably have is don't play commander unless you want someone to essentially be a leader in combat, as like especially RP wise.
Yeah.
Because outside of combat, it's fine to have like one or two of the characters kind of take charge in social set areas. But it's another thing in combat where everyone's kind of balanced and doing like their own different things. But this commander class is going to basically be kind of telling people what they need to do to a degree. Like not fully, like not on their turns, but outside of their turns, like you may be in a different position than when you started uh in that round. Like with Valkyrie's charge, for instance, you could be completely down and out, knocked out, 0 hit points. And with Valkyrie's charge, you'll get restored to 80 hit points, and you'll have to stride up to an enemy. Now, as a spellcaster, you may not actually want to do that, but you are also thinking, I would like to be alive. So you might end up doing it anyway. So it can cause a lot of problems if you're not careful. But there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of benefits to Commander.
Yeah. And it's definitely one of those things too. And what you were saying, Minthu, is this also plays into, excuse me, this also plays into the idea of potentially being sort of main character syndrome. You got to be careful if you have a player that you know tends to like to take over the campaign and sort of always takes that leadership position and maybe not a fun, healthy way that the whole group likes. Just like the exemplar, you might have to tell that player, "Hey, you might not be able to play this class." I don't think it would go as far as the exemplar. Like this isn't nearly as main character syndromey as I am a literal demigod with divinity in my chest. But that is something to consider. There's always some players that might take this a step too far. But again, communication is always going to be your top tactic to pun intended to avoid any unnecessary drama at the table.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else we want to discuss regarding the Commander? Do we want to discuss some of the higher level feats, or do we want to leave that for people to discover on their own?
I do want to draw attention to two particular feats that I was like, these are so cool. First is the 12th level Fortunate Blow. Basically, when you hit someone with this action, if you strike, the next creature other than you to attack that target gets to basically have 5th edition advantage. And that is just super sick. That is just such a fun feat to be like, I set up my friends. I make sure my friends do well. Keep in mind this has the flourish, so obviously you're not going to be able to go bam, 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 and hit like 3 different people. But what you can do is do setup strike as a follow up to make them off guard. So again, you don't even need to just do tactics to be the support character. You could go in and go down swinging and still be helping out your allies depending on how you build your commander. The second one that I really want to bring attention to is the feat 14 Desperate Resuscitation, which is sort of the capstone of this medic healer commander, which is you can revive someone as long as you have a healer's toolkit and the target's body is mostly intact, which is amazing. Just keep in mind that the target will then be immune to desperate recitation for a day. But it's so cool, and it's just a DC 40 medicine check, which notably, if you took combat medic, which you had to have because it's a prerequisite for this feat, you're using your intelligence modifier for that medicine check. So again, it's just a revive on a class that is not magical, which is just super cool, and I always love to see that where we see some of these things that have been exclusively mage specific being sort of gently given to some of the marshals to say, here's how you can help support your dying or dead friends.
Yeah, I think the medic dedication was really the only other way to do something like that before, and now it's in an actual like class that is like built into it. So that's pretty nice. The only other thing I want to call attention to myself, with Commander is the Demand Surrender, 18th level feat, which I just think is it's so funny. Basically, you take down an enemy, like you were an ally, take down an enemy, and you get to just try and make one of the other enemies surrender just completely. It isn't incapacitation effect, so it's not like it's always going to be helpful. But it could end up being really good, depending on the role, because you could just completely make someone give up, and not attack anyone for an entire minute, uh, unless they are attacked.
Or one of their allies, yeah. Or one of your allies does it, yeah. So again, really good. So what I think we should do now to close out the commander, just give final thoughts. So Minthu, you go ahead first. What final thoughts, final takeaways for this class? Are you excited? Just anything you want to say.
I think the name is the best way to comprehend this class. Thinking of them as a commander is really nice, but they're not just a commander. They don't just give out commands. They lead. They are doing basically all of this by being on the front lines themselves. So you're getting to hack and thwack while also giving your allies support benefits that honestly can change the entire battle just with a single action. So I think that is something a support marshal should be and should always try and be. And now there's a completely built class just for doing that.
Yeah, and I agree. And what I'll say for our people over in 5th edition who are maybe interested in the system, what I'll say is this character fantasy is exactly what you want if you were someone who's a big fan of Battle Master Fighter, which I know that was the first class I ever played in 5th edition. Uh, and really the first class I've ever played in tabletop role playing games. So this idea of working together as a team to take down like dangerous enemies is such an appealing and fun concept. And if you really want to play in that role, this class has mechanically done such a great job codifying it and really make you feel like you and your group are working together to take down dangerous world ending threats. And without further ado, let's look at the second class that has now just gone on playtest, and that is the Guardian. You are the shield, the steel wall that holds back the tide of deadly force exhibited by the enemies great and small. You are clad in armor that you wear like a second skin. You can angle your armor to protect yourself and your allies from damage and keep foes at bay. You also make yourself a more tempting target to take the hits that might have otherwise struck down your companions. So, Menthu, how do we feel about the Guardian?
I don't know about you, but personally, I love it. This is exactly what I wanted one of my characters in our longer running
Mhm.
campaigns to be. Just taking hits for others and never looking back. No regrets. Just taking it all for themselves, making the enemies just look at me. I'm the target. Do you want me to paint one on my back? Here it is. Just being able to do that mechanically is awesome. Cause like you could sort of do it RP wise if your GM was cool. And you could feasibly do that and protect your backliners. But now there's an actual mechanical way to just say, hey, if you're not attacking me, you're gonna have a bad time. Especially beyond what the champion does with their reactions. Because this is a I think we were going to be a little concerned that it was going to step on the champion's toes quite a bit.
I was definitely unsure of how they were going to make the Guardian work without it feeling, well, this is just a not divine champion.
Yeah, but I think they did a fantastic job personally.
I definitely think they did a good job. And I think to begin, first, we need to talk about their unique class features, their reaction and action they get that sort of really play into this idea of I am my party's shield. The first one being the reaction called Intercept Strike. And it reads this an adjacent ally takes physical damage. You fling yourself in the way of an incoming harm to protect an ally. You take the damage instead of your ally, although thanks to your armor, you gain resistance to all damage against the triggering damage equal to 2 plus your level. And then our second one, which is MMO tank kind of silly and I love it, is taunt, which is one action. With an intention in getting gesture, a cutting remark, or a threatening shout, you get the enemy to focus their ire on you. Even mindless creatures are drawn to your taunts. Choose a creature within 30 feet who must attempt a will saving throw against your class DC. Regardless of the result, it is immune to your taunt until the beginning of your next turn. If you gesture, this action gains the visual trait. If you speak or otherwise make noise, this action gains the auditory trait. Your taunt must have one of these two traits. On a critical success, the creature is unaffected, obviously. And on a success, until the beginning of your next turn, the creature gains a +2 circumstance bonus to attack rolls it makes against you and to its DCs of effects that target you. For area of effects, the DC increases only for you. But take a -1 circumstance penalty to attack rolls and DCs when targeting a hostile action. That does not include you as a target. On a failure, it's the same, but the penalty is a -2. And on a critical failure, it is the same as a success, but the penalty is a -3.
I love it. This is so good because even on a success, it is doing everything you want it to do.
Yes.
Like, yeah, they get to hit you harder, or at least have a higher chance of hitting you. But also, you're not hitting your enemies. And on a failure and critical failure, it's even harder for them to hit their enemies, your allies. So it's just, it's so good.
It is really good, and it is maybe one of the most interesting ways to represent this idea of drawing aggro from MMOs that doesn't make it feel forced into video gaming. You're eventually giving the enemy an option. You can smack the shit out of me, someone who can probably take it, or you can try to hit one of my squishy people who is now buffed up and you are less likely to actually hurt. And something else I want to call attention to here is this is not anything tied to one of your mental stats, which is usually what happens when you're trying to control someone. This is tied to the Guardian's key ability score,
Yeah.
which is strength. So that means this ability is completely dependent on your muscles.
Yeah, it's just looking strong enough to be more of a fear factor than your backline. I assume is the idea. But there's no mental trait to this. There is no like incapacitation or anything like that. It is just concentrate guardian. Those are the only two traits. And you just get to do so much with it. You get to say no. You're not allowed.
And that's so very interesting, especially with the fact that it does not have the emotion or the mental trait. Meaning, like it says in the feat, this works on mindless enemies. It works on everyone. This works on the final bad guy, right? So you literally say, hey, come hit me. And if you're standing by one of your friends, if they go choose to hit your friend anyway, you can say, no, 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 it'll hit me instead anyway.
And here's a fun little extra portion to add on all of this. If one of your support, like, backliners happens to use charisma quite heavily and they happen to be, I don't know, expert in diplomacy, they want to use Bon Mot on this enemy before you do this, that's going to be a -3 to their will check. -2 or -3, whichever. So it's going to be even more effective. So your backline gets to help you taunt the enemy, which helps them not get targeted. It's such a nice cycle.
And it really plays into this idea of I sacrifice myself for you to survive. Where I feel like something like the champion plays into this idea of I will lessen the blow for you. But it isn't this self-sacrifice kind of thing going on. The Guardian is someone who is willing to die for their friends, and that is very much codified in their feats and their features. But there's one more thing I want to talk about their features, which I immediately noticed and sort of was super surprised, and that is their armor and weapon proficiencies. Now, if we look down at the bottom of the Guardian's feature list, you will see that they get weapon mastery at level 17, but they get legendary armor at level 15.
Yeah, they're not hitting hard.
No. This is almost spellcaster bad. This is like 2 off from being the same as a battle or a war priest. they do not have good accuracy. And if you look at their features, they actually don't have a native way in their class to increase their damage outside of a subclass you can pick, which is I hesitate to call it a subclass, but it technically is one because it's written like other subclasses, but it doesn't do what other subclasses do, where it fundamentally changes how you play the game. It just changes what happens when someone is stupid enough to go punch someone else other than you.
Yeah, it's the threat technique feature, which is the subclass thing you're talking about. It isn't like it really isn't a full-on subclass. It's just like, hey, do you want to hit harder, or do you want to be more tankier? It's very basic.
Yeah, it is. So to boil it down, you have two options: Ferocious Vengeance, which essentially gives you 2 extra damage to hit someone who chose not to hit you after you taunted them. This ends up being only 6 damage by level 16, and that's the last time it gets boosted. And it starts out at level 2 at level 1, or 2 damage at level 1. And then you have Mitigate Harm, which is you gain resistance to damage from critical hits made by a creature affected by your taunt. This resistance is equal to 2 plus your level. And then this resistance increases by another 4, or actually another 6. Actually, it increases quite a bit. So you end up with a 8 plus half your level uh by level 15. So what I would say is, looking at the threat technique, given what happens, that you are more likely to be crit, you are more likely to be smashed around when you taunt people. I don't see anyone ever taking ferocious vengeance. I think you're always going to take Mitigate Harm if you want to actually use that taunt.
Yeah, I almost feel like Ferocious Vengeance should, instead of increasing damage, maybe just increase your like circumstance to hit by 1 or something like that. Uh Instead of it just making you deal more damage, because it's going to come to a point where Mitigate Harm is giving you like, what would it be, 18 damage resistance on a crit.
Yeah, by level 20,
Like,
which is not
that is
nothing.
very significant, and that can mean life or death, especially if you're getting crit on repeat against like the big bad boss. And that is more of an extreme viewpoint, but also the best your Ferocious Vengeance is going to get is, what would it be, 6 extra damage?
6 extra damage on a class that already has a worse than average
It
accuracy.
just it does not feel nearly as good. And both of these are pretty like specific circumstances, because you're probably not going to be able to taunt every turn, and enemies you do taunt are probably not going to go for your backline. So it's not even going to come up that much if you do take Ferocious Vengeance. It feels weird to choose between the two.
It is definitely one of those things where I don't think there's enough to almost even warrant it existing, because again, it feels like it's trying to be a subclass, but it is not really. It's so minuscule. And if my memory serves me, every class in the game has some sort of subclass mechanic, except for now the commander, the fighter, and the monk.
Yeah. Yeah, the fighter only chooses their extra good weapon. That's really all they choose.
Yeah, and the monk chooses what kind of stances or if they're going to be a key monk, but that's all feats.
Yeah, that's entirely set in feats for monk. Well, they get their path to perfection like saves, but that's also like barely a choice. It's just saying,
Yeah, that's just which save do you want to be better,
yeah,
right?
it's they're very nothing burgers, but they do like statistically help and like sort of differentiate your characters better. This, I feel like you could choose either one and you would not bat an eye at it for like probably the rest of the
Yeah,
game.
and that's sort of sad because I feel like there's always something about these classes with no subclass that makes it like, well, you're getting it in the feats. So really, it comes down to whether or not these classes without a subclass have good feats that really make you feel like you are a different character. And I don't know about you, Jax, but I would say that Guardian is like that.
Oh, for sure. I think it's obvious that I was hyped when we started talking about Guardian. More so than I was Commander. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really feeling Guardian more than Commander. But yeah, when I saw the threat technique and I read it, I was like, oh, okay. And I kept scrolling past the that page in the playtest just to try and get to the feats. Although there is two more features I want to talk about before we get there.
Well,
Um,
yeah, let's go ahead and talk about let's jump into the features.
all right, so Guardian armor is one feature that we kind of skip past, and it's very simple, but it honestly I think is going to add up to be a lot for lower level characters. And basically, you get armor specialization effects of medium and heavy armor. And you can rest normally while wearing medium and heavy armor, so you never have to take it off while you're in the field. That I feel like those two things alone are pretty good because you're just getting I think it's a flat 2 resistance to physical damage
Yeah,
if you're wearing heavy armor,
something like that. Yeah.
and it's 1 flat if you're wearing medium, and then as soon as you get potency runes, that becomes better. And then later on down the line, you get something that doubles those resistances. So you're going to hit with heavy armor. I believe it's 6 resistance to all physical damage for just a feature, and wearing armor, which is something you're going to do anyway. So that feels really
Yeah.
nice.
And something to point out, which is very interesting with the Guardian, you cannot be unarmored or wear light armor. You can, but you're only ever going to be trained. Your light and your unarmored never increase with your level. It's only medium and heavy armor.
Yeah, that is incredibly unique. I'm pretty sure there's nothing else in Pathfinder that does something like that.
None that I can think of.
Yeah, no, I think that's really unique and interesting. And forces you to actually build your guardian into more of a niche that I don't think any other class can really benefit from armor the way guardian is. And we'll get more into that in the feats, but I think it's really impressive what they've done with it.
Yeah. So are we ready to jump into the feats, or was there one more feature you
I
wanted to
will
talk
highlight
about?
tough to kill, just being
Oh,
a better
yeah.
version of Die Hard. um, you get the Die Hard feat, and then also if you're ever reduced to dying 3, the first time that happens each day, you just stay at dying 2 instead.
Yeah. Again, it really goes to show that you are meant to take the abuse for the party member, and you're expected to go down. And I think it is very clear that your cleric is going to become your best friend if you're playing a guardian.
Yeah. Oh, I completely forgot about this. I'm not gonna lie. But there is one more feature that is worth noting. And that is Guardian Mastery, your 19th level feature, the last thing you're going to be getting for your class. Your proficiency rank for your Guardian class DC increases to Master when you attempt a reflex save to avoid a damaging effect, such as a fireball. You add your armor's item bonus to AC instead of your dexterity modifier. If you get a success
Yeah.
when you do this, you get a critical success instead. So it basically just lets you use your item bonus to AC instead of your dex for reflex saves, which is probably your reflex or your dexterity is probably going to be 0, and your item
You
bonus to
also
AC is going
only
to be
ever
like,
get expert in reflex too. Your reflex is going to be your worst save.
yeah, but you do still get the success to critical success effect with this Guardian Mastery. So no save has quite been thrown to the wayside with this class,
Yeah.
which is really nice.
I agree. All right. Good stuff. And I think it is time to look at some of these feats now, because we got some interesting ones here. So I think um reading over these feats, it is very clear that the identity of this class is to go in, get hit and make it as hard as possible for your enemy to run down and beat up your squishies.
I will say this about the first level feats. There are none in particular that are like huge standouts. But I think that goes for most first level class feats. I think the biggest one being long distance taunt, where you just get 120 feet for your taunt range, which is quite funny. The idea of just like bashing your shield, and then someone's like 120 feet away, and they're just
Yeah.
like, "That dude, I'm going after him."
I would also put a Astrostom bodyguard. I think is very interesting, where when you intercept a strike against your charge or the person who's next to you, that person gains resistance to physical damage equal to 1 plus your half your level for 1 round, which is not insignificant. Especially when you see later on you're going to get feats that allow you to run and basically do intercept charge at a range, which I think is going to be, if you are planning on using intercept strike, that's what you're going to have to do. Because intercept strike, I feel, is not actually very good at base. It requires you to have a very specific, you are standing next to the person you're trying to protect, and usually those people are in the back line. You sort of want to be in the front line. So the only like classes I can think of is maybe some of your squishier D8 hit dice classes like your rogues or maguses. But if you're playing with one of them, I think they want you to be flanking and therefore not standing next to them. So it might be one of those things that this feature gets better the more marshals you have, at least at level 1, when you have to be adjacent to them, where other people can be providing that flank while you protect the person who didn't invest any con and only has light armor.
Yeah, there are the more you look at the Guardian feats, the more you think to yourself, wow, yeah, there's like 2 or 3 like main ways Guardian should probably be played. And Bodyguard's one of those feats that makes it evidence where you either need to be helping the backline like anyway, and just like kind of be not too far from them if something were to happen, or you need to be at the front line and using these support defensive tools for your front line, while just hoping taunt is enough to keep enemies away from the back. But I will say this about the Guardian feats as well. When I say standout, I am not going to call any of these feats like bad, because going over the Guardian feats, almost every single one of them are good options, and that's pretty rare for a class.
Especially one in playtest. I
Yes.
think one of my biggest critiques of Pathfinder Second Edition, in current moment, again, this will hopefully be fixed as we go along and more features are added. But there's simply some classes that have dead levels where I'm like, I don't think a single one of these feats are useful unless you're playing a very specific niche of this class. Thaumaturge, Psychic, Magus, those really stand out to me being classes that really want more feats. And even just this playtest, and as is historically the case, this is not all the feats that we're going to get. There's going to be a lot more in the actual book. Yeah, even looking at this, I'm like, every level there's something I'm like, I can see myself picking that, which is really rare and really nice. And I think that actually applies to both of these classes, which is nice.
Yeah, Commander definitely has like basically every level. There is at least 1 or 2 things you're going to be one of picking. Like you'll have to actually seriously think about what you're going to take for Commander. Guardian, I think it's going to end up being a little easier just because you'll probably have a certain way you want to be playing your Guardian. But even then, like the second level feats, I will just say every single one of them, especially like just on their own, are straight up good. Like you
Yeah.
cannot go wrong with any of the second level feats, and it almost makes me think, would I even want to take some of these fourth level feats versus just taking another second level feat if I were
Hmm.
making a character with this class? They're just all so good.
Yeah. So how about we go ahead and start talking about some of those really special feats before we sort of close out this video.
So I think hampering sweeps is going to be one of the biggest feats that people are going to be talking about. Um, and when I first went through this, I thought to myself, wow, hampering sweeps is just so good and so useful all the time. But the more I've thought about it, the more it kind of sits in a weird spot for me. Because what hampering sweeps does is that basically you use a single action on your turn, and until the beginning of your next turn, or until you move, whichever happens first, any foe that is within your reach of your weapon strikes or your unarmed strikes uh, will not be able to move outside of that range. They can still move around you and kind of move within your range, but they will not be able to move past that range. This sounds really good, and it's basically like a way to say, hey, you're never going to get to my backline. But isn't this kind of what taunt is supposed to be doing?
So here's what I'm going to say, because you had brought this up when we were talking about this class during the day and before we made this video, and you made that point. And I was thinking to myself, I think what's supposed to happen is hampering sweeps is what happens after you taunt. It basically, you sort of want to run off in a corner away from your squishies, taunt, that guy comes running at you, and then you say, okay, you're staying here. I'm not going to need to taunt you again to tempt you into it. That way I don't need to lower my armor class. You're already stuck here.
Yeah.
But what that does mean is that you are playing more into taunting than you are intercepting a strike.
Yeah, that
And I
that is
think,
giving up your reaction, sort of.
but what I will say then is I think that you're going to find when people start to play the Guardian, there are going to be two very distinctive ways to play the Guardian. One is to lean into your taunting, the other is to lean into intercept a strike. And I think you're going to find that these feats sort of lock you into one of those options being better than the other for your character, depending on how you build this class. And I think hampering sweeps is for that Guardian who does not mind being by themselves or being away from everyone else, saying, I've locked down the guy who is um hitting the hardest. Y'all pepper him with arrows, spells. I will keep him here.
Yeah. I will also say the other way that I found to make hampering sweeps really good is if there's two pretty like tough enemies, but they are not actually close to each other. So then that way you're at least taunting one and probably hampering sweepsing the
Mhm.
other. So then that way it's making both enemies actually kind of have a bad time attacking anyone but
Mhm.
you. But there is a point in playing the Guardian where you're gonna have to just kind of give up on that protective status because it's gonna
Yeah.
be too much.
There is only so much abuse you can take. And when before this playtest dropped, I was wondering if the Guardian was going to be our second D12 hit dice class. That's not the case. This does not get 12 hit points on a level up. It's still only 10, which is not nothing. That is the golden standard for melee class that's taking a lot of hits. But you're still not getting that crazy HP. And this is also not a con class. Like, I know some people were predicting it might be, sort of like how the Kineticist is a con class and therefore can potentially have crazy HP despite the fact that they're a D8 class. Um, but this being a 10 hit point class instead of a 12 hit point class is very interesting because you're right. If you get too many enemies on you, you're going to need someone to do emergency healing on you. But there is a feat down the line that I think can help mitigate that once per day.
Yeah, there are definitely ways that's gonna help you. That's why you have this like flat resistance on hits from your armor specialization. That's why you have um your reaction that's gonna help you take hits even if they were ones your allies were supposed to take. And later on, you're also getting resistances to energy types if you need them. So there's definitely a lot of ways to make yourself a bit tankier, and you're almost certainly Guardians are almost always going to be +4 strength, +3 constitution. There's if you're not doing that, it's kind of like
Yeah.
why not? But I can definitely see a +2 constitution guardian, and that'd be fine. Especially if you have a dedicated healer, because that's probably going to be one of the better comps. Honestly, is guardian plus like a cleric or a life oracle or something like that. And then just letting the
Hmm.
other two people in the party do either damage or like buff debuff stuff, and that'll be really nice. But yeah, it is kind of like a locked in position for Guardian, which is exactly what they're supposed to do, but it can be grueling.
Yeah. And it also, I think, I'm going to save this for final thoughts. I'm going to save this for final thoughts. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at some of these feats, and then we can continue this discussion because I do want to hit that feat note and then our final
Yeah.
thoughts to end this video.
Shielding Taut's definitely the next level 2 feat that I think is just like, wow, it's really
Yeah.
good. There's really no downsides to it. It's a flourish. You use an action, you raise your shield, and then you get the taunt. And they also have a -1 circumstance penalty to their save, making taunts better.
And what I also think is very important about shielding taunt is it one does uh action compression in a very important way, where if you taunt, you are going to want to raise your shield to try to offset that +2 they get. And shielding taunt just does that for you. You don't have to spend another action.
Yep.
So if you need to taunt and then run away, or if you want to try to punch someone, or if you want to try using some of these other 2 action uh things, you can do that as well.
Yep. I agree. And then going off of that, in the level 4 feats, shielded attrition, which does a million things, it feels like. You raise your shield and you provoke attacks from foes that might otherwise stop your allies from moving. Raise your shield and then stride up to half your speed. This movement triggers enemies' reactions as normal, but whether an enemy chooses to take that reaction or not, if they were able to react to your movement, they can no longer react to your allies' movement until the start of your next turn.
Which is so good. That is so good. There are so many times where I've had to go and say, okay, I guess I'm going to step twice because the enemy has a reach. And I'm just a lowly spellcaster, and I will get fucking mopped if I don't. And this can be a way to help support those people who get caught up or need to move around, maybe shuffle around to get flanking.
Yeah,
It is really
it's
useful.
really strong, and you know what it's especially strong for? It's especially strong against enemies that have more than one reaction, because it doesn't matter
Yeah.
how many reactions they have, they can't use them.
That's very true. So again, it's things like this that make the Guardian really good. So one that I like, if we go up a little bit and we look at this 8th level Mighty Bulwark. Basically, this is the exact same as I believe it is the Sentinel dedication.
It's either
I
Sentinel
think
or Bastion, I don't remember.
I don't remember. It's one of those defensive ones. But what I really like about this and the commander is that they looked at those 2 archetypes and said, these are feats that a lot of people are just taking to sort of be this marshal or to be in the front line. Let's just give these feats to the class. So Mighty Bulwark, for those who don't know, basically allows you to increase your Bulwark armor trait from +3 to +4, and it makes it so it applies to all reflex saves, not just damaging reflex saves like Bulwark does. So theoretically, if someone were trying to trip you with your a reflex save, you need to do something like that. You're going to be knocked prone or something. You get to now add that +3 +4 to that check as well, even if it isn't going to hurt you.
Yeah, I think Mighty Bulwark kind of like the standout feat for this level. Not really. There's also Quick Intercept, which
There's a couple.
yeah,
Quick
this
intercept being good with the extra reaction, and I think by now, if I am correct, you can get something like mobile protection, which allows you to intercept strikes trigger when your charge is up to 10 feet away and take damage. So again, you get to move and you get to block people that way, and you could potentially be doing that with multiple reactions.
Yeah, and then there's also group taunt, which lets you taunt up to 3 targets
Oh
within your
yeah.
taunts range, which is just
Although
outstanding.
I would be sweating a little bit. I would definitely not take group taunt if you did not take the shielded taunt, shielding taunt. Again, it's one of those things that again you're going to notice when you look over this playtest on your own, that a lot of these feats, do you want to be the guy who does intercept a strike, or do you want to be the guy taunting?
Yeah, I will say I don't know if we actually pointed this out before when we talked about taunt. It is something you have to do every round if you want it to be active. It ends at the
Yeah,
start of your next turn whenever you use it, so you do
yeah.
have to keep re-upping that.
And
Um,
you also have to think too, because if you're doing react or intercept a strike, you're going to, if you're still doing that and taunting, that means you're taunting your enemies right to the back line, right? Or right to your squishy or whoever you're trying to protect. So again, it's always something to consider.
yeah. Okay, but now we can get to arguably one of the best Guardian feats, Tough Cookie.
Tough Cookie is so fucking crazy. So you remember earlier in the video when I was saying that there is a feat that will allow you, if you're getting pressured by multiple people and you're taking a lot of damage, that you can save yourself once per day. And Menthu, if you can go ahead, just explain what Tough Cookie does.
Okay, so once per day for 2 actions. If you are currently at half your maximum hit points or less, you can simply gain half of your maximum hit points as temporary HP, and it lasts for an entire minute.
Yeah. And let's be honest, once that minute is done, the fight is likely over.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is a 10th level feat, so half your maximum hit points could very well be about 100.
Yeah. So you will be, if you are this is your oh shit, I'm about to die. Let me go ahead and toughen up a little bit. And I love the name. Tough Cookie. That is such a funny name for a feat. And this is something I really love about Paizo. They are not afraid of like really extracting flavor for the class and putting that directly into the feat. Another 10th level feat that I really love just for the visual of it is Get Behind Me. And essentially, when you intercept strike to protect an ally, you can move that ally up to 10 feet within your reach if they're willing. So again, I'm imagining that like your friend is about to get hit, you run in, you take the damage, and you just pick him up and move him away. You say, "Here, get away from this guy. He's going to hurt you." Right? I think that's just such a funny visual.
Yeah, it is basically just get down, Mr. President. The class feat. Which, if we have a
Yeah.
guardian in one of our games and someone doesn't yell "Get down, Mr. President" when they use this, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah. And I also noticed too, there is also a lot of things that interact with doing athletic checks instead of your doing attack. So this really almost feels like uh someone might be wanting to look at adding the wrestler dedication to this class, because you can get crazy stuff like right where you want them at level 12, which allows you to increase the distance you reposition or shove an opponent to 10 feet on a success or 15 on a critical success.
Yeah, that is another one of those anti-backline feats where you're just kind of hanging out with your, like, let's say you got 2 casters in the back, you're just kind of chilling out with them. Some goober shows up and you're like, get away. You're not allowed. Don't touch my friends. It's very nice to be able to just tell your enemies that you don't get to hurt your friends. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's so much a controlling of the battlefield that I would have expected from Commander, but I'm so happy we are also getting with Guardian.
Yeah. And then you get something like looking at improved Incept Foe at level 14, where when you intercept a foe, you gain a +10 circumstance bonus to your speed for that reaction. At the start of each of your turns, you gain an additional reaction that you can use only to use to intercept foes. And intercept foe is basically the reaction to allow you to get into position to do intercept a strike. Yes. So that's at a level 2 feat when an ally is a target of a melee strike, and you could reach that ally with one stride action, right? So again, that's you running all over the battlefield, giving people +2 ACs, and then being ready to use your intercept a strike reaction as well.
Yeah, it's very nice to be able to have two reactions where you can essentially just continuously help your whole team rather than just sacrifice your reaction for one ally. You don't necessarily have to completely choose who you're protecting that round. You can be helping multiple people in multiple ways, which is really really nice.
Any other feats you want to point out, Menthu?
Never. The 16th
I was
level
looking
feat.
at that one.
Never. Yeah, it's okay. Just flavor wise, it's amazing. But also, just essentially what it does is that it makes it harder for you to be controlled as a guardian, controlled or confused. Every time that you would strike an ally while you have the confused or controlled condition on you, you can re-roll the check with a +4 circumstance bonus to the save. And even if you fail, it doesn't make the condition worse. It doesn't increase the duration at all. And if you manage to succeed, whatever strike triggered that re-rolled save doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I think what makes this even better is that I have players who I know really love it when I mind control their characters and then turn their deadly fighter on the party. They would never take this feature. They would not.
I just want to say, considering there was literally one session where this exact thing happened to the character that I want to be, what is essentially a guardian. Now that this playtest is active, I will probably be redoing their whole sheet.
No longer a champion.
Yeah, no champion, just be a guardian. Let's go. If they had this, none of that would have happened. The story would have went completely differently. It would have went perfect, but no.
It would have been crazy. But yeah, so again, it's a lot of fun being able to do that. And with that, yeah, I think I have covered all the feats I want to look at, unless there's any specific ones you want to check out.
I mean, all of the high level feats are just really good. So I think I've talked about all the ones that I think are worth noting. Otherwise, just go and check out the playtest. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here.
Oh yeah. So now let's go ahead and give our final thoughts about the Guardian. Menthu, if you want to kick us off here to get us wrapped up for the video.
Something I predicted for the Guardian was that what fighter is to offense, the Guardian was going to be to defense. And I'm so happy I said that because it has ended up being so true. Being able to protect your allies so consistently and with like so much focus is going to feel really good for those people, especially for those people who always end up playing the healer or the support. You can now be a marshal and still be the support and help all of your friends and just be a good little bean. And then also, it's not like you get hampered as a marshal for this, because you can still be hitting, you can still be doing decent damage and doing your part and setting up all your allies. It's just going to feel really nice as a frontliner. And like you said earlier, it fulfills that MMO tank idea, which, I mean, I'm one of those people that loves being the tank in MMOs. So this is going to feel really good to play.
Yeah. And what my final thought here is that one, this class is very single attribute dependent, so it's a very sad class. So basically, all you really need is strength. I mean, you're going to want to put some pumps into Constitution, but for any game that has free archetype, because you only really need to worry about your strength and your Constitution, you can add whatever type of dedication you want to this class, and it will probably work just fine. Just something to throw out there. But what I will say, again, just like how I have to caution, if you are someone who is looking to be the fighter, to attack, to hit, to do damage, this is not your class. Just like Menthu said, this is the defensive fighter. This is the fighter that is about taking hits and shielding people. You're not about doing damage. Again, remember that slower weapon proficiency, that really not having a native way to increase damage outside of your pseudo subclass, which even then I think it is objectively worse than the other one. I would never take that if I were playing a guardian. But again, I could be proven wrong. Maybe it's broken in some sort of niche application. But again, this is not a damage dealing class. You're coming in for field control. You're coming in to take that wrestler dedication, hold the front line, keep the back line safe, and protect your friends all the while. So I think with that, this has been another video from Natural Fails. Thank you guys for listening so much. Give us a like. Maybe comment what kind of video you want us to do next. I definitely really like doing these discussion formats with Menthu, and Call or Howl of the Wild is just around the corner, and I'm sure we can drum up some content about that. Maybe talk about what ancestries we're very excited for, because I know I'm excited for a couple. How about you, Menthu?
Oh yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff just looking at the product description on Paizo's website.
Yeah, so we might be taking a look at that. But until then, please leave a like, maybe consider subscribing if you've enjoyed the content. And until next time, we'll see you out there. Have a good rest of your night. Bye.
Bye.